My name is Thomas Gooding, and this is a review for Star Wars The Last Jedi, which is the second installment in the sequel trilogy of the Star Wars saga. It follows mostly the same characters. Here's a quick summary. The Resistance is currently on the run from the First Order, and they are very depleted. Very few people are left, and there's just about one or two transport ships of rebels. They jump into hyperspace to get away, but new technology found by the First Order allows them to track them through hyperspace, and they are left in a standstill just barely far enough away to survive, waiting for their fuel to deplete. In order to combat this, Finn and his new friend Rose go to a planet called Canto Bight to find a hacker to get onto the First Order ship and disable the tracking device. While this is happening, Rey is trying to find and get training from Luke Skywalker, who has isolated himself after his failure with his student Kylo Ren, formerly known as Ben Solo. First, I'm going to talk about what I liked about the movie. The movie's visual effects were astounding. This is most evident in the final scene when the new captain sacrifices herself by using the hyperdrive to slice through the enemy's ship. It is visually amazing, and the rest of the movie does not disappoint as well. Another very good part of this movie is the dynamic between Rey and Kylo Ren. They share this bond that's through the Force, where they never see each other in person, but they talk to each other and they can feel each other's presence. This dynamic is very strong, as they are essentially two sides of the same coin. Kylo Ren and Rey are actually both fueled by anger, yet Kylo Ren has given into it and Rey is still resisting. Kylo Ren's whole point is to try to get Rey to join him, as he sees their similarities. And this is done very well throughout the movie. The first time it does this is when Luke is nearby. And the conversation was going relatively good until Kylo Ren mentions Luke's name. I think this is because the last mentor that Rey had was Han Solo, also Kylo Ren's father. Kylo Ren murdered him in front of her eyes, and she lost him. Now she has a new mentor, and the moment she hears Kylo Ren talk about him, she gets scared and is afraid that he's going to get taken away from her too. This dynamic is played upon continuously, and the acting by both actors is very strong and leaves the audience wondering who will switch to whose side at some point, as their chemistry is undeniable. Now, my biggest issue with this movie, and the whole sequel trilogy in fact, is the disregard for Finn's character development from the first movie. In the first movie, he runs away from the First Order as he gets some sort of feeling, assumingly from the Force, telling him to run away. So he escapes with Poe Dameron. But the entire movie, he's just continuously running and not seemingly having a purpose. But by the end of the Force Awakens, he has found a purpose with the Resistance and with Rey by fighting. Yet, in the first, 10 minutes of this movie, he wakes up a bumbling idiot and tries to abandon the Resistance for no other reason than to quote-unquote save Rey, even though she's a very capable Jedi. They essentially just turned the clock back on Finn and decided, okay, well, might as well just make him the exact same way he was at the beginning of the first movie, except significantly worse because he has no idea what he's talking about ever. He was an Imperial stormtrooper, so he would have had some training. The entire movie, he is constantly asking questions. He does not know anything. He is bumbling around, can't shoot a gun, can't do anything for himself. It is ridiculous. He was a stormtrooper. Stormtroopers are well trained. He had so much potential as a character. He felt something in the Force telling him to not shoot innocent people, telling him to leave the Resistance. He felt something in the Force, and they disregard that completely. He has so much potential. He wields a lightsaber multiple times in the first movie, as he feels some sort of connection to it. Even though it's not as strong as Rey's, there's still some connection. The next movie, He barely does anything. He has maybe one fight that he loses. He gets super lucky and gets a sucker punch on a clone trooper. That's his only thing. His character is further enabled by Rose, who is possibly the worst character written I have ever seen in Star Wars. Worse than Jar Jar Binks, because Jar Jar Binks was supposed to be comedic. He was not supposed to be a serious character. This character, Rose, was supposed to be serious and was just terrible in every single way imaginable. We can start with the first time we see her. She's crying in the corner, and she stops Finn from deserting. Okay, yeah. Is she a badass, or is she vulnerable? I don't know. First impressions, you're confused. Then, she's some sort of genius. Like 10 seconds later, she figures out exactly how they're being tracked. They're being tracked through hyperspace. So, she is smart enough to figure out exactly how they're being tracked and how to fix it, but she's not smart enough to hack, and they have to find someone else to do this. That just seems completely meaningless, and just leads to a meaningless side adventure on this planet called Canto Bight, or, as the fans have called it, the Casino Planet. They go there to find a hacker to get him onto the ship, so they can disable the tracking device that tracks them through hyperspace. However, instead of them, finding some speedy thing where they can go onto the ship, and the ship would have been much more interesting than Canto Bight. Canto Bight was boring. It was essentially 30 minutes of Disney pushing their political agenda onto the audience in the most boring way possible, and the most blatant, boring way possible. 30 minutes of bashing capitalism in general, and then 2 sentences about war profiteering just out of nowhere. It makes no sense. It is completely worthless, and it's not that politics aren't involved in Star Wars, because they are. The entire prequel trilogy had so much politics in it, but it was irrelevant to the story. It was completely irrelevant to what was happening, and it's just a distraction and makes the audience bored, essentially. To make matters even worse, they don't even find the person they're looking for. They get captured or in jail and luckily find some other hacker, and they break free and escape because of that hacker and BB-8. And BB-8 has just been kind of messing around and doing whatever, and then he just comes out of nowhere and saves them. Okay. And it happens again later in the movie when they are essentially about to be executed by the First Order, when, of course, their plan doesn't work to disable the hyperdrive tracking. And so their whole plan just was irrelevant, which makes that whole journey irrelevant. And so the audience just wasted 30 minutes, essentially. And the worst part is, this whole side journey could have been easily avoided had the new captain of the Rebel transport, Vice Admiral Holdo, who she is a new character, would have just communicated with her subordinate officers that are just trying to do their job and help people. Specifically, Poe Dameron. Poe Dameron is an excellent pilot, not a great strategist, but he's very passionate about the Resistance, and he does whatever he can to help. Vice Admiral Holdo refuses to share information with him, leading him to force this mission to Canto Bight with no real backup plan. And Poe Dameron, in response, thinks, okay, she's not telling me anything, she's not doing anything, she's just delaying the inevitable of us dying. And so he forms a mutiny to take over. He does. Which is ridiculous, because it could have been avoided had Holdo just told her his plan. And they give no reason why she didn't tell him his plan. No reason whatsoever. Had there been a spy on the ship, I don't know, maybe, but they give no reason. She just doesn't tell him for whatever reason, and that just causes an infinite amount of problems. And that kind of lazy writing is why this movie is struggling. It has some very good aspects, and in its attempt to subvert expectations, it fails miserably. It is trying to say, this new Vice Admiral Holdo, who's a woman, is powerful and doesn't need to respond to Poe Dameron. Doesn't need him. But in that effort, it's completely invalidating Poe Dameron as a character, who is established. How as the audience are we supposed to trust Vice Admiral Holdo when she doesn't even trust a person we already know as a character? It's lazy. Overall, the movie is poorly planned out. The dialogue is okay, but the plot itself has so many holes and is just ridiculous and pointless to a fault, especially when you take into account the other two movies. It is essentially erased in the next movie, becoming meaningless. And it essentially erases what was done in the first movie, what was set up in the first movie. In the first movie, it was set up a big deal about who Rey's parents were. In an attempt to subvert expectations, they say, oh, Rey has no meaningful parents. Well, that's okay. But in the first movie, they bring up Finn as a possible Jedi and someone who could be very powerful. In an attempt to subvert expectations, they make him a terrible character. Poe Dameron, who is seen as the leader of the Resistance, is then basically undercut by Vice Admiral Holdo in an attempt to subvert expectations. But their attempt to subvert expectations leads them alienating the audience. The audience is left just sitting there wondering what is happening and why is it happening, because it does not do a good job of explaining it. Overall, I would give this movie a 65. Barely fresh. Barely adequate. I think it is very visually astounding. The music is very good. And I think the Jedi arc with Luke and Luke sacrificing himself by using the Force, some introduction to new Force abilities, is very cool. And while the relationship with the Force and Kylo Ren and Rey was very cool, the whole scene in the throne room featuring Snoke was seemingly, again, pointless. While it was a very important scene, Snoke had been built up to be this super powerful character and is essentially defeated because of a party trick, because Kylo Ren catches him off guard. And I think, again, their attempt to subvert expectations fails and just disappoints the audience. However, the following fight scene, where Kylo Ren and Rey team up to defeat the guards that protect Snoke, is relatively well choreographed and is a very beautiful scene. Again, the directing itself and the camera work and the special effects are amazing. But at the end of the fight, neither of them change. Rey doesn't turn bad, Kylo doesn't turn good. They talk for like 2 seconds, and then they just dip. So that whole scene was basically pointless. They were right back to square one, because Snoke had been a non-factor for the entire movie. And Rey escapes and goes to the Resistance on some distant planet where they were able to land and hide out, essentially, until the First Order finds them. The First Order finds them relatively quickly because of the hacker that they found earlier, because of that pointless side mission, snitches on them. So again, that side mission was not only pointless, but actually was a detriment. So it just leaves to asking why. And they're on this planet, and it's essentially a last stand for the Resistance. They call for help, no one comes, they're just there by themselves. Finn finally has a chance to be a hero. They're hiding behind a wall, and the First Order brings down this cannon that will essentially destroy the wall. Finn, in an attempt to be brave, takes a ship and tries to fly it into the cannon to destroy it, to give the Resistance a chance to escape. However, at the last second, in an attempt to again subvert expectations, Rose comes in and knocks Finn out of the way, and the ball gets blown up anyway, and then they escape anyway. So Finn, when their attempt to him redeem himself as a character with meaning, just gets pulled away from us at the last second. And the reasoning behind it, they give it to us in the movie, is quite stupid. Rose says, we don't win this war by fighting the things we hate, but by saving the things we love. And that's stupid, because she was talking so hatefully about the people of Canto Bight. And so it's just a stupid moment that takes away from the powerfulness of Finn sacrificing himself. And that is why this movie fails on multiple occasions, because